I'm Abigail, 29, and last spring my sister Natalie called me socially unfit to attend her wedding. Those words pierced my heart as she delivered them across our parents' dining table. Instead of fighting back, I booked a solo trip to Bali that coincided with her perfect day. Little did I know that being excluded would lead to the most transformative journey of my life. If you've ever felt rejected by those who should love you most, this story might bring you some comfort. Before I dive in, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to see more stories about finding peace in unexpected places. Growing up in Hartford, Connecticut. The contrasts between my sister and me were as predictable as the changing seasons. Natalie, 3 years my junior, was a burst of summer sunshine, effortlessly drawing people to her natural warmth. I was more like autumn, quiet, introspective, content with solitude among my books and thoughts. Our parents, Diane and Frank Thompson, never explicitly stated their preference for Natalie's personality, but their actions spoke volumes. Dad's eyes would light up when Natalie entered a room, boisterous and full of stories about her social conquests. Mom would proudly display Natalie's homecoming photos and cheerleading trophies front and center on the mantel, while my academic certificates were neatly tucked away in a folder in the study. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became a haunting refrain throughout my adolescence. Not said maliciously, but casually, as if suggesting I try a new hairstyle rather than fundamentally change who I was. Our upper-middle-class lifestyle meant frequent dinner parties, charity galas, and community events where social prowess was currency. Dad's position as a bank executive and Mom's role on various community boards meant we were always in the public eye. Natalie thrived in these settings. I wilted. My social anxiety began manifesting around age 12. It wasn't just shyness, it was a physical reaction: sweaty palms, racing heart, and sometimes panic attacks before large gatherings. My parents interpreted this as being difficult or antisocial. "Abigail's just going through a phase," they'd tell concerned relatives when I disappeared to the quietest corner at family reunions. The phase never passed. While Natalie collected accolades: homecoming queen, sorority president at Boston College, and eventually a marketing executive position at a prestigious firm in New York, I pursued a quieter path. I excelled academically, earning my master's degree in library science from Columbia. I published articles in respected journals about information access and literacy. I secured a position as the head research librarian at Hartford Public Library by 27, an accomplishment that would have been celebrated in most families. In ours, it barely registered. "That's nice, dear," Mom said when I called with the news, before quickly changing the subject to Natalie's promotion. Family gatherings became exercises in invisibility. I'd help in the kitchen or engage one-on-one with an elderly relative, finding comfort in the margins of our family events. Occasionally, Dad would notice and pull me into conversations. "Come on, Abby, try harder. These are important connections," he'd whisper, nudging me toward a group of his colleagues. The irony was that I did try. Constantly. Each social interaction was a carefully choreographed performance that left me exhausted. Natalie could work a room for hours and leave energized. I needed days to recover from an evening of small talk. Despite our differences, I genuinely attempted to connect with Natalie. I attended her college graduation despite a crippling migraine triggered by anxiety. I helped her move into her first apartment in New York, carefully arranging her books and organizing her kitchen while she charmed the neighbors with wine and conversation. I sent thoughtful gifts on her birthdays, first editions of books she had mentioned liking, though I suspect they remained unread on her shelf. The facade of sisterly closeness masked a growing disconnect. We spoke on the phone monthly, our conversations increasingly dominated by Natalie's social calendar and professional achievements. My contributions to these calls dwindled to encouraging sounds and brief updates that never seemed to capture her interest. "That's the thing about you, Abby," she once said after I tried explaining my excitement about a new digital archive project. "You get so caught up in these boring details that no one cares about." Her words stung. But I had grown accustomed to such casual dismissals. I had constructed a life that accommodated my social anxiety, a peaceful apartment filled with books, a job that valued my attention to those boring details, and a small circle of friends who understood my limits and respected them. To my family, especially my mother, this life was a consolation prize. "You could be so much more if you just put yourself out there," she'd say during our weekly calls, her disappointment thinly veiled. What none of them understood was that I wasn't failing at being Natalie. I was succeeding at being Abigail, on my own terms, in my own way. Then came the engagement that would expose just how deep the family fault lines ran. The call came on a Sunday evening in December. Natalie's voice bubbled through my phone, pitched higher than usual with excitement. He proposed. James proposed last night at Le Bernardin. It was perfect. There was a string quartet and roses, and he got down on one knee right in front of everyone. She barely paused for breath. "And Abby, the ring, it's 5 carats, cushion cut, with a diamond band." Victoria helped him pick it out. James Sullivan was exactly the type of man our parents had envisioned for Natalie, a cardiothoracic surgeon from a Boston family with connections that even impressed our status-conscious mother. They had met at a charity gala 18 months prior, and their relationship had progressed with the efficiency one might expect from two highly ambitious people. "That's wonderful, Nat. I'm really happy for you," I said, genuinely pleased for my sister despite the knot forming in my stomach at the thought of the inevitable social obligations that would follow. "Mom and Dad are over the moon. We're thinking June at the Hartford Country Club. And Abby," her voice softened slightly, "I want you to be my maid of honor." The request caught me off guard. I had assumed she would choose one of her many friends, perhaps Kimberly, her sorority sister, or Melissa from her marketing firm, women who shared her enthusiasm for spotlight moments. "Are you sure?" I asked hesitantly. "Of course. You're my sister," she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Besides, Mom would have a fit if I didn't ask you." That last comment should have been my warning. The next few weeks passed in a flurry of activity. I was added to a group text with Natalie and her 7 bridesmaids, all glamorous, accomplished women whose messages overflowed with exclamation points and emoji. They planned brunches, dress fittings, and spa days with dizzying speed. The first bridesmaid meeting was held at an upscale restaurant in Hartford. I arrived 15 minutes early, as was my habit, and chose a quiet corner table. By the time everyone arrived, the mimosas were flowing and the volume rising. Kimberly, a statuesque blonde who worked in pharmaceutical sales, immediately took charge. "Ladies, we need to make this the most fabulous wedding Connecticut has ever seen. Natalie deserves nothing less than perfection." I smiled and nodded, contributing where I could, suggesting books as table centerpieces, quickly dismissed, and offering to create a custom library of love poems as a guest book, received with polite disinterest. "Abigail, you're so unique," Melissa said with a tight smile. "But we're thinking more along the lines of an Instagram-worthy event. The hashtag is going to be #SullivanSayIdo." Throughout the lunch, Natalie shot me occasional concerned glances as I grew quieter. When I excused myself to use the restroom, she followed. "You okay? I know this isn't really your scene," she said, reapplying her lipstick in the mirror. "I'm fine. Just taking it all in," I replied, washing my hands for longer than necessary. "Look, don't worry about contributing too much to the planning. The girls have it under control. Just try to look excited, okay? For me." I nodded, swallowing the hurt. "Of course." Despite my discomfort, I threw myself into being the maid of honor Natalie wanted. I spent 2 months' salary on the champagne-colored designer dress she selected for me. I enrolled in public speaking lessons to prepare for the toast I would give at the reception. I even practiced small talk with my therapist, preparing conversation starters for the inevitable socializing. 3 months before the wedding, I attended the engagement party at James's parents' estate in Greenwich. The Sullivan family wealth was old and substantial, evident in every aspect of their sprawling property and the casual way they spoke about their summer home in Nantucket and winter trips to St. Bart's. Victoria Sullivan, James's mother, was a formidable woman with a perpetual expression of polite assessment. She greeted me with a cool handshake and eyes that cataloged every aspect of my appearance. "So you're the librarian," she said, her tone making my profession sound like an exotic and slightly distasteful career choice. How intellectual. Throughout the evening, I caught her watching me with narrowed eyes as I struggled through conversations with their family friends. During dinner, I was seated far from Natalie at a table with distant Sullivan relatives who spoke exclusively about people and places I didn't know. Later, while helping the caterers clear dessert plates, a task that gave me purpose and a break from socializing, I overheard Victoria speaking to my mother in the pantry. "Diane, I hope you don't think I'm overstepping, but I'm concerned about Abigail's role in the wedding party. She seems so uncomfortable. James has very important colleagues attending, and first impressions of our families will be so crucial." My mother's response made my hands go numb. "I understand completely, Victoria. We've always worried about how Abigail presents in social situations. Let me speak with Natalie. Perhaps we can find her a less visible role." I dropped off the plates and left the party early, claiming a headache that wasn't entirely false. In the weeks that followed, Natalie's attitude toward me shifted subtly. My calls were increasingly sent to voicemail. I was removed from certain planning email threads. The bridal shower was scheduled during a library conference I had mentioned several times. Oh, was that this weekend? I completely forgot. Still, I clung to the belief that these were oversights born of wedding stress rather than deliberate exclusions. I continued preparing for my maid of honor duties, even as the knot of dread in my stomach grew tighter. Then came the dinner at my parents' house that would change everything. April in Connecticut brings capricious weather. Sunshine one moment, chilling rain the next. The evening of the family dinner was appropriately turbulent, with dark clouds gathering as I drove to my parents' Tudor-style home in West Hartford. The table was set with Mom's best china, a sure sign this wasn't just a casual family meal. Dad opened an expensive bottle of Cabernet, and Mom served her special occasion roast chicken. The conversation flowed awkwardly, with strained smiles and significant glances between my parents and Natalie. After dessert, a lemon tart that I barely tasted, Natalie cleared her throat. "Abby, could we talk in private for a minute? Maybe in Dad's study." My father's study had always been the location for serious conversations in our family. College acceptance discussions, financial talks, and the occasional discipline issue had all taken place within those book-lined walls. I followed Natalie, my pulse quickening with each step. She closed the door behind us but remained standing, toying with the massive engagement ring on her finger. "There's no easy way to say this," she began, her voice taking on the same professional tone she likely used in marketing presentations. "We've decided to make some changes to the wedding party." "Changes?" I repeated, a chill spreading through me. "Yes. Victoria and James feel, and Mom and Dad agree, that perhaps the maid of honor role isn't the best fit for you." She wasn't meeting my eyes, instead focusing on a point somewhere above my left shoulder. "It's nothing personal, it's just, you're not really comfortable in these kinds of social situations, and the wedding has become a much bigger event than we initially planned." I sat down in Dad's leather chair, my legs suddenly unsteady. "You're removing me as maid of honor? It's for your own good too, Abby. You'd be miserable having to give a speech in front of 300 people. This way you can just enjoy the day without all that pressure." The false concern in her voice made something crack inside me. "So who will be your maid of honor now?" "Kimberly. She's already been helping with most of the planning anyway." Natalie's voice had an edge of defensiveness. I nodded slowly, trying to process this betrayal while maintaining my composure. "I see. So I'll just be a regular bridesmaid then?" Natalie's pause lasted 2 heartbeats too long. "Actually, James's cousin Brittany just got engaged, and Victoria thinks it would be a nice gesture to include her in the wedding party. So we're at capacity with bridesmaids." She took a deep breath. "And to be completely honest, Abby, you're just not socially fit enough for a wedding of this caliber." Those were Victoria's words, but I don't disagree. The room seemed to tilt slightly. "Not socially fit? What does that even mean?" "You know exactly what it means. You can barely hold a conversation at family dinners. let alone schmooze with James's colleagues and the Sullivan family friends. This wedding is important for our family's social standing and for James's career connections. I felt as though I'd been slapped. So I'm not even in the wedding party now. Natalie's face hardened slightly. You'll still be invited to the reception, of course. We thought that might be easier for you than the ceremony, which will be more intimate anyway. Intimate? You just said there will be 300 people there. 300 important people. Abby. People who matter. Unlike me, her words implied. Did Mom and Dad know you were going to do this? I asked, my voice barely audible. We discussed it last week. They think it's for the best. Dad said you'd understand. I stood up, needing to escape the suddenly airless room. When I opened the door, I found my parents standing in the hallway. Their faces masks of uncomfortable resignation. You knew about this? I asked them. Honey, we just want what's best for everyone, my mother said, reaching for my arm. I stepped back from her touch. What's best for everyone, or what's best for Natalie and her perfect wedding? My voice cracked. Now, Abigail, my father began in his problem-solving tone. There's no need to make this more dramatic than it needs to be. Natalie has a lot riding on this event. And I have nothing riding on it, is that it? Because I'm just the socially awkward sister who might embarrass you all. The silence that followed was answer enough. I grabbed my coat and purse from the front closet, ignoring their calls to come back and discuss this rationally. The rain had started in earnest, mixing with the tears streaming down my face as I fumbled with my car keys. The 20-minute drive home passed in a blur of windshield wipers and muffled sobs. My apartment, usually my sanctuary, felt hollow that night. I curled up on my couch, still in my damp clothes, and let the waves of hurt wash over me. Over the next week, I moved through my days like a ghost. At work, I focused on tasks that required minimal interaction. At home, I ignored the mounting texts and calls from my mother, who vacillated between guilt-inducing messages, "We're just worried about you," and irritation, "You're making this more difficult than it needs to be." I tried reasoning with them once, in a three-way call that left me feeling worse. I've supported Natalie my entire life, I said, my voice raw from crying. I've shown up for every important event despite my anxiety. And now I'm being cut out of her wedding because I'm an embarrassment. Nobody said you're an embarrassment, my mother countered. It's just that Victoria Sullivan has certain expectations. And this wedding is connecting our families forever. So the Sullivan's opinion matters more than your own daughter's feelings? Now, Abby, my father interjected, you're being unfair. We're just trying to make this day go smoothly for everyone. By pretending I don't exist? By hiding me away at the reception like some shameful secret. Their non-answers told me everything. The final blow came in a text from Natalie. I hope you'll reconsider your attitude about this. My wedding day is supposed to be perfect, and I don't need your dramatics ruining it. Either come to the reception with a good attitude or don't come at all. That night, I stood in my shower, hot water mixing with tears, until a moment of clarity struck me with unexpected force. I deserved better than this. Not just from Natalie, but from all of them. And for the first time in my life, I was going to prioritize what I needed over what my family expected. The idea came to me around 3 a.m, during one of those sleepless nights when pain gives way to clarity. I opened my laptop and typed "best places for solo female travelers seeking peace" into the search bar. Bali appeared in nearly every list. Images of emerald rice terraces, ancient temples, and turquoise waters filled my screen. A place where spirituality wasn't a buzzword but a way of life. Somewhere I could be anonymous yet connected. Somewhere as far from Hartford, Connecticut, and the Sullivan-Thompson wedding as geographically possible. I checked the dates of Natalie's wedding against flight options. The synchronicity felt like confirmation. I could leave 2 days before the wedding and return 10 days later, giving myself ample time to recover from international travel and whatever emotional aftermath might follow my absence. My hands trembled slightly as I entered my credit card information, committing more money than I'd ever spent on myself at once. When the confirmation email arrived with the subject line, "Your Balinese adventure awaits," a surprising sense of lightness spread through my chest. I hadn't felt this certain about a decision in years. The next morning, I called Lauren, my closest friend since graduate school and one of the few people who fully understood both my anxiety and my family dynamics. "You did what?" she exclaimed when I told her my plans. "Abby, that's brilliant. And so unlike you." "Is it though?" I asked. "Maybe this is exactly like me, the real me who's been trying to emerge for years while I've been busy trying to contort myself into someone my family could accept." "I'm proud of you," Lauren said simply. "So when are you telling them?" "Not until closer to the date. I need time to plan without their voices in my head." And plan I did. I researched Balinese customs and appropriate clothing. I read travel blogs by women who had ventured to Indonesia alone. I joined online forums where travelers shared tips about everything from avoiding tourist traps to managing digestive issues abroad. Instead of shopping for a wedding gift from Natalie's registry, I purchased moisture-wicking tops, comfortable walking sandals, and a high-quality camera. Each purchase felt like a small act of rebellion and self-care combined. My therapist, Dr. Mitchell, nodded approvingly when I explained my decision during our weekly session. "This isn't about revenge, is it?" she asked, studying my expression. "It started that way," I admitted. "But now it feels like something else. Like reclaiming something." "What do you hope to find in Bali, Abigail?" The question gave me pause. "Peace," I finally said. "The kind that comes from within. Not from other people's approval." Dr. Mitchell smiled. "Then you've already begun your journey." We spent the rest of the session setting intentions for my trip. Practicing self-compassion when anxiety arose, engaging with new experiences at my own pace, and redefining family on my terms, perhaps recognizing that sometimes family is who we choose rather than who we're born to. As the weeks passed, my apartment transformed. A map of Bali appeared on my refrigerator, marked with potential destinations. My coffee table became home to guidebooks instead of bridal magazines. I practiced basic Indonesian phrases during my morning commute. For the first time in my life, I was preparing for something that was entirely for me, not to please my parents, not to support Natalie, not to meet anyone else's expectations. 2 weeks before the wedding, I finally steeled myself to break the news to my family. I chose Sunday dinner, the same setting where Natalie had delivered her exclusion. Symmetry seemed appropriate. I arrived at my parents' house with a calm I hadn't felt in their presence for years. Perhaps it was the knowledge that I had a concrete escape plan, or maybe it was the 3 sessions of meditation practice I'd completed in preparation for Bali. Whatever the cause, I felt centered in a way that was unfamiliar but welcome. Mom had prepared pot roast, my favorite childhood meal, which I suspected was a peace offering of sorts. We made it through appetizers with superficial conversation about the neighborhood and Dad's golf game before Mom inevitably turned to the wedding. "Natalie's final dress fitting is Tuesday," she said, carefully avoiding looking directly at me. "The alterations are minor, just a slight adjustment to the train." "That's nice," I replied, taking a sip of water. "I'm sure she'll look beautiful." "You know, Abigail," my father interjected, "Victoria Sullivan mentioned they could use help assembling the welcome bags for out-of-town guests next weekend. I thought perhaps you might volunteer. Could be a nice way to contribute." The perfect opening. I placed my fork down deliberately. "Actually, I won't be available to help with welcome bags. I'll be on my way to Bali." The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. "Bali? The island in Indonesia?" my father finally asked. As if there might be a Bali, Connecticut I was referring to. "Yes. I've booked a 10-day trip. I leave Thursday." My mother's face paled. "But the wedding is that Saturday." "I'm aware." "I'm entirely serious. My flight is booked, my accommodations are confirmed, and my vacation time has been approved." "Is this some kind of childish protest?" my father demanded, his problem-solver tone giving way to clear irritation. "No, Dad. This is me making a healthy choice for myself after being told I'm not socially fit enough to attend my own sister's wedding ceremony." "Abigail Jean Thompson," my mother began, using my full name as she had when I was a misbehaving child, "you will cancel this trip immediately. I don't care what it costs. Your absence would devastate Natalie." I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped. Devastate her? Mom, she's the one who cut me from the wedding party and the ceremony. She made it very clear that my presence isn't important to her. That's not true, my father protested weakly. She just wanted to make things easier for everyone. Easier for everyone except me. I took a deep breath. Look, I'm not doing this to hurt Natalie. I'm doing it because I deserve better than to be treated as an embarrassment by my own family. Not socially fit enough for a wedding of this caliber. Your words, not mine. You're trying to ruin my wedding because your feelings got hurt. This is so typical of you, making everything about your social anxiety and how hard everything is for poor Abigail. I felt a familiar tightening in my chest, but pushed through it. I'm not trying to ruin anything. I'm removing myself from a situation where I've been made to feel unwelcome and inadequate. I hope you have a beautiful wedding. The following days brought a barrage of texts, calls, and even surprise visits from extended family. Aunt Judith lectured me about family loyalty. Cousin Patrick suggested I was having some kind of breakdown. Uncle Robert offered to pay for therapy if I would get my head straight before the wedding. Only Aunt Susan. She didn't approve of your mother's family background, thought they weren't our kind of people. Tried to have your mother's parents seated in the back at the reception. Aunt Susan chuckled. History has a way of repeating itself in families. Stand your ground, Abigail. Some lessons need to be learned the hard way. At work, my planned absence was met with unexpected support. My direct supervisor, Maria, had witnessed one of Natalie's condescending visits to the library and seemed to understand more than she let on. Bali changed my perspective on many things, she said. Signing off on my vacation request. I hope it brings you what you're seeking. Even my small circle of friends rallied around me. Lauren helped me prepare for the trip, lending me travel accessories and downloading movies to my tablet for the long flight. My regular coffee shop barista, Tyler, who had listened to snippets of my family drama for years, gave me a bag of Indonesian coffee beans. So you don't forget us little people when you're off finding yourself, he joked. The validation from these peripheral relationships stood in stark contrast to my family's reaction, highlighting just how dysfunctional our dynamic had become. A particularly nasty text from Natalie arrived 3 days before my departure. Everyone thinks you're being selfish and dramatic. Mom is in tears every day because of you. If you actually go through with this, don't expect to be welcomed back into this family with open arms. I read it twice, feeling a strange sense of calm. This message crystallized everything: the emotional manipulation, the groupthink pressure, the conditional acceptance that had characterized my family relationships for years. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I continued packing, carefully rolling clothes into my suitcase while my parents prepared to host Natalie's rehearsal dinner. The day before my departure, my parents made one final attempt at intervention, showing up at my apartment unannounced. We need to talk about this rationally, my father began as I reluctantly let them in. We've been talking for weeks, I replied. Nothing has changed. Abigail, please, my mother pleaded, looking genuinely distressed. This will create a rift in the family that might never heal. Is that what you want? I considered my words carefully. What I want is to be valued and respected for who I am, not constantly measured against some social ideal I can never meet. What I want is to be included in my sister's wedding because I'm her sister, not excluded because I might not impress the right people. That's not fair, my father protested. Isn't it, though? When was the last time either of you stood up for me? When Natalie made fun of my career choice at Christmas? When Victoria Sullivan suggested I wasn't good enough to be in the wedding photos? Or when I was literally removed from the ceremony because I'm an embarrassment? Their silence was telling. I'm not doing this to hurt anyone, I continued, my voice softer. I'm doing it because for once in my life, I need to prioritize my own well-being. And right now, that means not putting myself in a situation where I'm clearly unwanted. We want you, my mother whispered. On your terms. Not as I am. They left shortly after, my father's parting words hanging in the air. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for over there. As I zipped my suitcase closed that evening, I realized I was looking for something I'd never fully had, the freedom to be myself without apology. The journey to Bali was long, 26 hours of travel time from Hartford to Denpasar with layovers in New York and Hong Kong. By some cosmic coincidence, my plane lifted off from JFK almost exactly as Natalie's wedding ceremony would be beginning. As the aircraft climbed through the clouds, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. For the next day and a half, I existed in the liminal space of international travel, neither here nor there, suspended between my old life and whatever awaited me. I used the time to read, doze, and jot initial thoughts in the leather-bound journal Lauren had given me as a bon voyage gift. Today I choose myself, I wrote somewhere over the Pacific. For perhaps the first time. Arriving in Bali was a sensory awakening. The air was thick with humidity and the scent of incense and tropical flowers. Despite my exhaustion, I felt more alert than I had in months, taking in the riot of colors and sounds as my driver navigated the chaotic traffic from the airport to Ubud. My accommodation, a small villa overlooking rice terraces, exceeded my expectations. A four-poster bed draped with mosquito netting occupied the center of the room. French doors opened onto a private veranda where a daybed and small plunge pool offered views of the lush landscape. The owner, a warm Indonesian woman named Wayan, welcomed me with ginger tea and fresh fruit. "You have come very far," she observed, her English accented but clear. "Both in distance and perhaps in other ways?" Her perceptiveness startled me. "Yes," I admitted. "I'm hoping to find some peace here." She nodded knowingly. Bali has peace to offer those who seek it. After settling in and taking a much-needed shower, I ventured out to explore the nearby streets of Ubud. The town pulsed with a gentle energy, so different from the aggressive pace of American cities. Locals moved with purpose, but without hurry. Offerings of flowers and incense sat at the entrance to every shop and home, a reminder of the spiritual practices woven into daily life here. I found a small cafe and ordered my first authentic Balinese meal, letting the spices dance on my tongue as I watched the world go by. No one stared at my solo status or seemed to find anything unusual about a woman dining alone. The anonymity was liberating. Back at my villa, I fell into a dreamless sleep, my body finally surrendering to jet lag. I woke early the next morning to the sounds of roosters and distant chanting. According to my watch, Natalie was likely enjoying her wedding reception at that very moment, dancing with James under twinkling lights at the Hartford Country Club. Strangely, the thought brought no pain, just a distant acknowledgement of a parallel reality I had chosen to step away from. My first full day in Bali coincided with a local temple ceremony. Wayan invited me to observe, lending me a traditional sarong and sash to wear. I sat quietly at the edge of the gathering, watching as the community came together in ritual and celebration. An elderly man noticed my fascination and explained parts of the ceremony in broken English, his kind eyes crinkling at my attempts to pronounce Balinese words. "You have good spirit," he told me, patting my hand. "Open to learn." The simple compliment moved me nearly to tears. When had anyone in my family last acknowledged my spirit rather than critiquing my social performance? The following day, I joined a small yoga retreat at a nearby center. The instructor, an Australian expatriate named Emma, created a safe space for practitioners of all levels. During our introduction circle, I found myself speaking with unexpected openness. "I'm here because my sister excluded me from her wedding for being socially unfit," I said, the words coming out before I could censor them. So instead of being somewhere I'm not wanted, I decided to be somewhere that might help me heal, rather than the awkward silence I expected. My disclosure was met with nods of understanding and murmurs of support. A tall woman with silver-streaked hair reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm Samantha," she said. "My family disowned me when I divorced my abusive husband. Said I was breaking my vows and embarrassing them. That was 5 years ago. Now I live in Melbourne and come to Bali twice a year to remember who I am apart from their judgment." That conversation was the beginning of an unexpected friendship. Samantha and I found ourselves gravitating toward each other throughout the retreat. Her story of reclaiming her identity after family rejection resonated deeply with me, and she seemed to find something valuable in my journey as well. The first year is the hardest, she told me over dinner one evening. You keep waiting for them to realize what they've done and make amends. But eventually you understand that your healing can't depend on their recognition of their mistakes. The yoga practice itself became a powerful metaphor. Poses I initially found impossible became manageable with patience and proper alignment. When the instructor adjusted my warrior pose, she murmured, "You're stronger than you think. Trust your foundation." I began each day with meditation at sunrise, sitting on my veranda as the light changed over the rice fields. The practice was difficult at first, my mind constantly returning to thoughts of home, wondering if anyone had noticed my absence at the reception, imagining conversations and confrontations. Gradually, I learned to observe these thoughts without attaching to them, letting them float away like leaves on a stream. On my fourth day, I joined a small group hike to a nearby waterfall. The trek was challenging, muddy paths and steep inclines that tested my modest fitness level. Several times I considered turning back, but something kept me pushing forward. When we finally reached the waterfall, the majesty of the cascading water silenced our entire group. The guide invited us to swim in the natural pool at its base. The locals believe these waters have healing properties, he explained. That they wash away what no longer serves you. Despite my usual self-consciousness about being seen in a swimsuit, I waded into the cool water. The force of the falls massaged my shoulders as I allowed myself to be fully present in the moment, feeling the water, hearing its roar, tasting its freshness on my lips. For those minutes, I wasn't Abigail the disappointing daughter or Abigail the socially anxious librarian. I was simply a human being, connected to the natural world and to my own body in a way that felt profound. As I emerged from the water, Samantha nodded approvingly. "You look different already," she observed. "Something's shifting." She was right. Something was shifting, internally at first, but gradually becoming visible on the outside as well. My perpetually tense shoulders began to relax. The furrow between my brows softened. I found myself smiling at strangers and engaging in brief conversations with other travelers without the usual rehearsal of potential topics beforehand. The ceremony took place at dawn in a small family temple. The Balian, an elderly man with eyes that seemed to see straight through to my soul, spoke no English. But his assistant translated his instructions. I was to write my pain on a small piece of paper, then wash in sacred water as offerings were made and prayers chanted. "Write truth," the assistant urged. "Not what you think should be written. What is really in heart." My hand trembled as I wrote, "I am enough as I am." I released the need for my family's approval. I wept openly, not the controlled tears I had permitted myself in the privacy of my apartment, but deep, racking sobs that came from a place I hadn't allowed myself to access before. The Balian nodded approvingly. "Good," his assistant translated. "Poison coming out." That afternoon, I realized I hadn't checked my phone for news from home in days. When I finally did, my father's brief and businesslike, "Call when you can," and a single one from Natalie, "Hope whatever point you're trying to make was worth hurting everyone who cares about you." Surprisingly, these messages didn't pull me back into the vortex of family drama as they once would have. I sent a brief text to my parents confirming I was safe and well, then returned my phone to airplane mode. The second half of my trip expanded beyond emotional healing into pure discovery. I took a surfing lesson on Kuta Beach, falling repeatedly but laughing each time. The instructor, a perpetually smiling Balinese man named Made, pointed out how the ocean's patterns mirrored life. "You cannot fight the wave," he said as I sputtered to the surface after another fall. "You must feel its energy and move with it. Same with life's problems." I spent an afternoon learning to prepare traditional Balinese dishes in a cooking class. About resilience, about the difference between solitude and loneliness. "I've spent so much of my life trying to be someone I'm not," I wrote one night. "Trying to force my square peg self into the round hole my family created for me. What if I just stopped trying to fit? What if my social unfitness isn't a flaw, but simply a different way of being in the world?" The most profound moment came during a sunrise meditation on my 9th day in Bali. As the first golden light touched the rice terraces, creating a mosaic of shadow and illumination, a clarity washed over me that was almost physical in its intensity. I understood with absolute certainty that I was exactly who I was meant to be. That my quietness, my thoughtfulness, my preference for depth over breadth and human connection, these weren't failures, but features of a perfectly valid way of moving through the world. I am enough, I whispered to the rising sun. I have always been enough. In that moment, peace wasn't something I was seeking, it was something I had found. Something I had created for myself by having the courage to step away from those who couldn't see my worth. I spent my final day in Bali with Samantha, exploring the art markets of Ubud and exchanging contact information with promises to stay in touch that we both knew we would keep. What will you do when you go home? I pressed my palm against the window in a silent goodbye to the island that had given me so much more than I had come seeking. I wasn't returning with souvenirs or photographs alone, but with a fundamental shift in how I viewed myself and my place in the world. I was coming home, but to a life I was determined would be different from the one I had left behind. The Hartford I returned to was physically unchanged, the same colonial architecture, the same manicured parks, the same rhythms of New England life, but I experienced it differently through my newly calibrated lens. The library where I had worked for years felt both familiar and fresh as I walked through its doors after my trip, greeting colleagues with a confidence that felt natural rather than forced. "Abigail," Maria exclaimed when she saw me. "You look transformed." "I feel transformed," I admitted, unpacking my desk and setting up my computer. "Bali agreed with you then?" It did. It really did. Throughout that first day back, colleagues stopped by my desk, curious about my travels. To my surprise, I found myself sharing stories easily, not just facts about temples and beaches, but meaningful reflections on what the journey had meant to me. There was no rehearsed script. No anxiety about saying the wrong thing, just authentic connection that felt so different from my previous social interactions. When I returned to my apartment that evening, Lauren was waiting with takeout and eager ears. "Okay, I need every detail," she demanded, setting out containers of Thai food. "And don't you dare downplay anything. I want the full eat, pray, love experience." I laughed and began sharing, pulling out my journal to read certain passages. Lauren listened intently, occasionally wiping away tears. "I've never heard you speak with such conviction," she said when I finished. "It's like you've found your voice." "I think I had to travel halfway around the world to realize it was there all along," I replied. "Just buried under years of trying to be someone else." The following day, a text arrived from Aunt Susan. "Heard you're back. Your mother is in quite a state. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. Call me when you're ready." We met for coffee that weekend. Aunt Susan. I felt a twinge of sadness, but no regret. And Dad? Quiet. More so than usual. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "This was a long time coming, Abigail. Families develop patterns that sometimes take a seismic event to break. You may have done them a favor in the long run." Her support meant more than I could express. The first contact from Natalie came a week after my return, a terse text message about wedding gifts. "We're sending thank you notes. Did you want the small crystal bowl people thought was from you, or should I return it?" The old Abigail would have apologized, would have felt guilty for the assumption that she had sent a gift. The new Abigail simply replied, "Return it with my best wishes for your marriage." My parents attempted to re-establish normalcy with an invitation to Sunday dinner. "I need time to process everything that happened before and during my trip." "Abigail, you can't avoid us forever," she said, her voice tinged with familiar disappointment. "We're your family." "Yes, you are," I agreed. "And I hope we can build a healthier relationship moving forward. But that will require changes on all sides, not just mine." The silence that followed suggested this was a concept she hadn't considered. At work, I found myself volunteering for projects I would have avoided before: a community outreach program for adults with social anxiety, a monthly book club focusing on travel literature, even a presentation to the library board about digital archiving innovations. Each step outside my comfort zone reinforced my new understanding that social comfort wasn't binary but a spectrum. and that I could expand my range without fundamentally changing who I was. I printed some of my favorite photos from Bali and framed them for my office. I encountered Victoria Sullivan in the grocery store. She was examining avocados when she looked up and saw me. For a moment, naked discomfort crossed her face before she composed herself. Abigail. Of course. I'm sure it was, I said, maintaining eye contact. I hope James and Natalie are enjoying married life. She seemed unsure how to respond to my lack of apology or explanation. Yes. Well, they're currently in the Maldives. The honeymoon, you know. Sounds wonderful. I recently returned from Bali myself. A life-changing experience. I highly recommend it if you ever want to expand your horizons. I smiled genuinely and moved on, leaving her slightly flustered, not my intention, but a satisfying side effect nonetheless. When an invitation arrived for a post-honeymoon dinner to celebrate Natalie and James, I considered it carefully before declining with a note, "Congratulations again on your marriage. I'm still working through some things and don't think a family gathering is the right setting for that process. I wish you both well and hope we can connect one-on-one when you're ready for an honest conversation." It was the most authentic communication I'd had with my sister in years. Instead of forcing myself into family obligations that left me drained and hurt, I began building a community that energized and supported me. I joined a local travel club where I met people eager to hear about Bali and share their own adventures. I started a small support group at the library for people with social anxiety, creating a safe space for others who felt marginalized by a society that prizes extroversion. Samantha and I maintained our connection, scheduling regular video calls that bridged the distance between Connecticut and Australia. Her journey of family estrangement and self-reclamation continued to provide perspective and encouragement for my own. The healing isn't linear, she reminded me during one late-night call. There will be days when you question everything, when you wonder if the price of standing up for yourself was too high. Those are the days to be especially gentle with yourself. She was right. There were moments when the pain of family fracture hit me anew. My father's birthday that I celebrated with a card rather than presents, holiday plans that remained uncertain. The knowledge that family photos from Natalie's wedding would never include me. During these times, I returned to my Balinese practices, meditation, journaling, movement, connection with nature, and found my center again. 6 months after my return, I began planning my next solo trip, a 2-week exploration of New Mexico's artistic communities. My mother alternated between tentative respect for my boundaries and attempts to pull me back into old patterns. My father seemed genuinely confused by the shift in our dynamic, but made small efforts to connect on new terms, sending articles about topics we shared interest in, suggesting one-on-one lunches rather than family gatherings. Natalie and I maintained a distance that was painful but necessary for the time being. The label socially unfit that had once devastated me had become almost amusing in its irony. In choosing to honor my authentic self rather than contorting to fit others' expectations, I had found a social fitness I never knew was possible, genuine connections based on mutual respect and appreciation rather than obligation or performance. One evening, as I sat on my apartment balcony watching the sunset with a cup of Balinese coffee, I opened my journal to a blank page and wrote, "Being excluded from Natalie's wedding was perhaps the most painful gift I've ever received. It forced me to confront the conditional love I had accepted as normal for so long. It pushed me to seek peace not in others' approval but in my own self-acceptance. The journey took me halfway around the world, but the real distance traveled was internal, from shame to pride, from anxiety to confidence, from fitting in to belonging. I am no longer apologizing for taking up space in the world in my own quiet way. I am no longer measuring my worth by my ability to perform sociability. I am no longer accepting the narrative that my sensitivity and introversion are flaws to be fixed rather than qualities to be honored. Sometimes the most profound peace comes not from making peace with others, but from making peace with yourself. My Balinese journey taught me that. And for that lesson, I am strangely, paradoxically grateful for those painful words, not socially fit enough. They led me to discover that I am enough, exactly as I am. Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your own well-being? How did you find peace with your decision? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that they too are enough exactly as they are. Thank you for traveling this journey with me. And remember, sometimes the path to peace begins with the courage to walk away from what no longer serves you. Until next time, take care of your beautiful, authentic self.